ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to see are spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, leave now. Welcome to It's Spoilerin Time. Why do I keep doing that?
What, introducing a show? Do you know why? Because you're a professional, Tom.
No,
that's why you do it.
If I were a professional, I would have realized by now that all I have to say is, it's Spoilerin Time.
We need Brant to finish our intro graphic, and we could put in like a hilarious echo of you and me together going, "It's Spoilerin Time," or something like that. Then you don't have to say it. And you don't have to feel weird about it.
Hey, everybody, it's great. We're here. We're going to talk about Cosmos. I almost said Cosby because I was starting to sound like Cosby.
We'll talk about Cosby right to his face.
About the Cosmos and the Godzilla.
Just
Justin Robert Young's here. We're going to talk about the Godzilla. I'm on to episode 12 in my The Shield book club. Where are we going to start? We're going to start with the Cosmos?
Yeah, I think that's the safest area, right? Spoiler
I don't
alert.
know. I think we're all going to die, apparently.
Okay. Man, I swung so hard back and forth on this one. I love the first half. The first half was talking about the idea of immortal genes, the idea of panspermia. And even though, like, I just finished reading the book Lucky Planet that talks about how it's not just unlikely that life would arise, but it's unlikely that we would have the charitable weather that we've had long enough for life to arise, much less intelligent life. So very likely the conclusion is that we're alone in the universe. Even then, I was able to get like inspired by the panspermia, like life spreading from planet to planet. I'm like, yeah, I'm into this. And then, look, I understand. And it's not outside of the playbook for Cosmos to play the we're all screwed or whatever. But it just felt the anti, the pro feel guilty about everything you do in your life agenda just weighed a little heavy on me on this episode.
I didn't get that. I didn't get that you need to feel guilty about everything you do in your life. I felt more like it was trying to say, hey, everybody, because, we are given life on this planet. We are the ones who can make or break what happens here, and everything can fall apart like it did for other civilizations. But like those plucky bacteria that could make it to other stars, we can rise to the challenge. I felt like they were trying to have a more uplifting message.
Okay, you could do that, but if you can do that, then maybe don't say things that are patently false, like, well, you can't trust companies because they only do what's short-sighted. And it's like meanwhile, it's like we're looking at a world with SpaceX and Tesla, and it's one of the hottest industries to get into now.
I don't remember exactly what they said, but what I remember them saying in my mind is companies are focused on short-term gains. And so they aren't going to be the ones to solve long-term problems.
Which is so not true. That's
exactly true.
Untrue.
And for public companies,
public
companies are focused on short-term gains.
SpaceX is a public company. They are not focused on the short term. They want to move us all to.
Yeah, they are. They have that. SpaceX is a unique company that can focus on short-term gains and have a long-term goal as well. But
SpaceX isn't public.
Stockholders of all companies
say they
want
were.
short-term gains.
Tesla is. SpaceX is not. But you have seen
SpaceX
companies
is not
like
a public
Google.
Company. Okay.
You've seen companies like Google and Apple that have said very public. Google bucked the trend in terms of what they were going to report, and they made very, very clear when they IPO'd that we are not going to overreact to quarterly things, that we have big long-term goals, and that if you are not down with how they are going to handle their disclosures, then get the hell out. And they have become one of the highest valued stocks there is. Apple has also continued to show the way that they do their announcements and projections, which you have covered for so long, Tom, is specifically designed to fend off people who want to think about the immediate in favor of the big broad trend. So I don't think that I agree with Brian that I think it is easy, if not incorrect, to just say all companies act in certain ways, because I think the best companies act in the ways that will keep them alive and profitable forever.
And again, maybe they said all companies act this way, or maybe they said it in the way that Brian said, and I don't remember it that way. What I remember them saying was companies act for short-term gain, and the vast majority of companies do that. And that's not even a criticism. That's not my saying it's bad. That's the way that the market was set up, is go for short-term gains. And I don't think you can argue that that's something that corporations do. They,
Sure,
they
sure,
look
sure.
at that quarter to quarter gain. And those are great examples of exceptions to that. I totally agree with that. I still think that doesn't matter. Like, that to me wasn't the
I would also
overall
like to note, I
tone
didn't
of
see
this.
the episode. So I
Well,
am really
no.
just,
I mean, you
everything
put
on
better
Brian.
you put better words to my thoughts than I did myself. So in that regard, I'm glad to have you be my representation. I will say that as bummed as I was, because they said that and they made sure to show like open dumping sewage or whatever, all the horrible stuff that you would imagine that they were showing 30 years ago, saying that we're all going to be dead in 20 minutes. But then they turned it around, and it made me happy for 4 minutes and 38 seconds while they positively talked about our chance to expand to the stars and what the future will be like and what will become of mankind as we ascend to our next stage and what problems are going to go away. It killed me. They spent 5 minutes talking about how we're all screwed and doomsaying, and then they introduced the calendar for the next 5 billion years, and then they say, and in the first half seconds, all that'll be fixed. So anyway, look at this over here now. And I was so bummed. It's such a positive message. Like, every futurist agrees that we're trending towards fixing these things. We're trending towards getting off planets. We're trending towards becoming eco-poets and expanding we are accepting our manifest destiny to leave this stupid petri dish rock that we're caught in. And he gives us this log on that. It is a truly inspiring message. And I was bummed. I was thrilled that he said it at all. Bummed that it took up exactly 12 seconds. So there.
I don't know. I just have an entirely different read of it myself. Like, I feel like those things that bothered you so much didn't really strike me as being meant to be that negative. And maybe that's just my Pollyanna nature to be like, oh, well, he's not being that. And those, I had the same reaction where they put on the smoke spewing smokestacks. I'm like, well, okay, I guess you have to, if you're going to talk about dangers to avoid, you got to show dangerous stuff, but it's a little over dramatic. But I still felt the whole message there was hopeful. Like, and the fact that he only spent 12 seconds talking about futurists saying that we can overcome them is appropriate to a show that's only supposed to be talking about things that are discovered and for sure, right? And that is saying like, hey, you know what? There's hope in the future, we think. But that's not the province of that show.
I disagree. And first of all,
otherwise we'd be talking about future technologies all the time. And that's not, we're here to talk about science and what is, not what might be next. That's a different kind of show, I feel like.
So in the original Cosmos, the original intention was, and this is this the last episode? Did they do 11 or is there 12th one?
There's 2 more.
Okay.
Next week is climate change.
Okay.
And then the week after that is the finale, I think.
Okay. Well, one of the last episodes of the original run was originally meant to be about human colonization of other planets. And because of the climate of the time, of course, the height of the Cold War and all that, Carl Sagan either convinced or got convinced, I forget which it was, but he agreed that it should be like, will we survive at all? It was a very negative image. So in that regard, when I complain about the overall negative image of many of the scenarios that they portray in Cosmos, this is not a new Cosmos versus old Cosmos thing. I think old Cosmos was very pessimistic and at the time, having grown up in that era, deservedly so. But I'd like to feel like maybe we live in a different time than we did 30 years ago, and maybe there's more cause to be positive than there was 30 years ago. And I was hoping that would be reflected in maybe a more optimistic version of this stuff. And I didn't see it to the level that I'd hoped for. And in that regard, I was disappointed. Is that fair to say? Yeah,
totally fair. I mean, no one can tell you that you weren't disappointed and that you were hoping for something else, right? That's totally fine. That is what this is all about, actually. I feel like Cosmos is about like trying to help people say, okay, here are some facts that you can go and create your own expectations for. And we're all going to create our own focuses and our own forecasts out of that. I do think that it was really kind of letting the scales fall from my eyes when they put him on Mars, though.
Yeah, that was...
Because it was so well done, and he's not there, that you're like, oh, he probably wasn't even at Newton's place. He probably wasn't in Paris. He probably wasn't anywhere this entire season except on a green screen.
And he flat out said that he was not inside the neutrino collector in Japan. Like that apparently was on one of the podcasts or whatever that we talked about before.
Right. You told me
that was that Mars moment elicited an involuntary snort from me. And I regret it. I felt bad the moment it happened, but there was something about it that was just the right amount of over the top that I snorted at that.
Justin, any other thoughts on Cosmos before we move to Game of Thrones?
I think Neil deGrasse Tyson is annoying, and I haven't watched Cosmos.
Really?
Oh, I knew you hadn't watched it at all. Okay.
No, I mean, I watched the first episode, and I was fairly annoyed by it. And I think he's incredibly smart, and he's an important science voice and educator. But I sometimes find his definitive, I would say, borderlining on arrogant tone on things to be counterproductive. And I was bothered by the first episode because of that. And that's where I'll leave it.
Right on. I will say real quick that I did like the twist on the cosmic calendar that it was the next 5 billion years. Although I will point out that the moment it showed up from over my shoulder, who I forgot was there, my 10-year-old goes, "This again, really?"
I heard her voice in my head when I saw it.
Which I'm glad they gave us a twist, and I understand the conventions of television are that you have to re-say something again and again and again. But that definitely was a visceral moment from Penny.
All right, let's move on to Game of Thrones, where I can almost not remember what happened, but I know I liked it.
Well, let's. I guess we could start off with certainly. I guess we'll start with the end. The end was, of course, that what's the name? Oberyn, whatever his name is from
Oberyn Martell.
That was
Yeah.
the end.
Martell, yeah.
No, wait, he's
that
not
was the last
Martell, right?
part. The last thing was
Dorne.
Littlefinger.
Oh, shoot. That was the end. That's right. Okay, so that's a good point. All right, stuff that happened. Let's just go in whatever order. First of all, I did love the way they represented Bronn saying, "Hey, man, I like you and all, but not going to happen." I thought that they did a good job of representing him and his practical nature, and I thought they did a good job of representing Tyrion, game recognized game in that moment, and a genuine handshake. And I like the fact that they had Tyrion just hold on to that handshake just a little bit longer, to indicate between the two, he was the one suffering from a bout of genuine feeling more than the other one. And I equally liked him being at the pit of despair. I guess we also saw him and Jaime, but that moment when Martell, when he's got nothing left and he realizes just how screwed he is and how foolish he was, for Martell to say, like, "I'll be your champion," like full on brimming with tears. Loved all of that. Everything in that thread I thought was very well done.
Yeah, I think they've handled the visits to Tyrion series quite well. It's not exactly the way I pictured it necessarily, which usually Game of Thrones gets that stuff like spot on for me, but that hasn't mattered to me much. Let's get to the flying though at the very end of the film. I can't remember. Does this happen that way in the books?
Exactly. In fact, I remember
Okay.
was reading or listening to it on Audible. That was one of the moments that I just remember being like, "Oh, I bet you this ends either an episode or a season." Like, this is just one of those like what kind of moments that the series delivers so well, both in book form and in television. It's been very interesting to see kind of where they've gone with Littlefinger. One of the things that the series has done that the books did not is that the books have so much connective tissue that you fairly rarely, with the big exception being Theon, you very rarely kind of lose track of people. But Littlefinger is one of those characters that kind of fades away and then makes a dramatic reappearance. The fact that they have cemented and drawn very direct lines, which do not exist in the books, to Lysa Arryn's complicity in Jon Arryn's death, as well as Littlefinger's part in the conspiracy to kill Joffrey, has been very interesting, and in my mind makes the final element of this episode all the more delicious. That it's like, no. Littlefinger is, I think me and Brian have talked a lot about this, that like the Game of Thrones is really Littlefinger versus Varys, when you break everything down and every shadow element of the whisper that is motivating somebody else to do something else. And you have seen Littlefinger very much emerge as somebody who was as important as he is to this greater Game of Thrones. It's so good. I mean, the show has been amazing. I understand that people had, and I had my own reservations about the way that the Cersei Jaime scene in the Sept went down. But other than that, I have found the edits to the source material in this season in particular excellent and amazing, and they have made me care about storylines that I did not really care about all that much in the books. They have heightened those that I genuinely was living and dying on every word with. It's exceptional and the best, and I love it.
You know, one of the things that was different in this episode is this is one of the ones that we saw a big focus on Dario Naharis. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but Dario, whatever's, who they swapped actors on. We also saw a new actor playing the Mountain, Gregor Clegane, right? Sir Gregor.
Yeah.
It seemed like, at least with the Mountain, they bothered to try to make him look kind of like the guy who looked before him. And I got upset watching it. Like, why didn't they even try? Why didn't they even try to remotely cast someone close to the previous Dario? Like, what's the justification for that?
The old Dario left to be the new transporter.
Well, I know, I understand.
But why not?
Why
try
not make
a little
him
harder
look
to
like
find
it?
somebody who fills the role better? Maybe they just couldn't find somebody who looked like Dario and could act as well.
But they couldn't take this guy, have him grow out his hair, make it a little bit blonde. So what if his features are totally different?
You mean just like make him over more? I don't know. That's a good
even
question.
superficially close, because it's like ever since we first saw him, nothing
Maybe the
about
actor's
him reminds me of
agent
the old guy.
objected to that.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why. I think if it would not surprise me if Game of Thrones is like, yeah, whatever, we're Game of Thrones. Like, we'll fill you in at the beginning, and we'll make sure to call him Dario 9 times in one of the scenes. Whatever, you'll pick it up.
Yeah. Did you guys feel particularly impassioned one way or the other about the scenes that they had on the, with what's her name on the Western Sea?
Daenerys.
Yeah, Eastern, whatever. Yes.
Khaleesi?
I'm curious that they have not gotten into more of the Marinese intrigue from the books. That's the logical next step for her.
Isn't that in Dance with Dragons though?
Yeah, but we've seen other stuff
set.
from
I know,
Dance with Dragons.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, there's very little else. I don't know. A lot of that stuff takes place later. I feel like they're trying to tread water there a little bit to let some of the other stuff catch up.
But keep in mind, all of book 4 took place in Westeros. Most of book 5 took place,
But there are things happening at the same time as Daenerys in Dance with Dragons that we are far from.
That's fair enough.
And I can't say what they are, but there's a little misalignment happening.
I guess part of it, I mean, and maybe it's just something that you're totally right, Tom, that they have to just sort of, doggy pedal on until we kind of get a little bit more synchronicity. But I certainly felt that like the Marinese internal strife is something that has far more legs than the stuff that they are dealing with now, which is really just, Daenerys. I mean, it's like The Office. Like, they should just go to a handheld camera and have her mug and have interviews where she makes funny faces. It's just very procedural at this point until we get to some of the drama on the home front in Meereen.
So 2 things left. I guess we've got the continuing story with Arya and the Hound.
Yeah, my favorite buddy cop movie.
Which is weird because when you read into the book, it didn't read so chummy as it looks on the screen. But even though they're doing the exact same thing,
weird
it really looks
places
chummy
in the book. It doesn't come through that way all the time.
Yeah.
But this is my favorite part about Game of Thrones is that all they've done is give us on the road buddy cop movies. We had Brienne and Jaime was their own on the road buddy cop comedy. The Hound and Arya are their own on the road buddy cop
Tyrion,
comedy.
of course, was the buddy cop thing. Yeah.
And now Brienne was now she gets another 48 hours on the King's Road with Podrick Payne instead of Jaime. So it's super exciting. I
did like seeing Hot Pie in that scene. That was really cool.
Well, and also I thought it was a great moment of them translating accurately to the visual medium, not the the specifics of what happened in the book, but the spirit of what happened in the book. The way Hot Pie overshared and the way Podrick was like, well, you really shouldn't tell everyone. All of that was sort of like obvious and wouldn't have been said that way in the book because you would understand the intrigue. But that moment at the end where Hot Pie comes in and overshares and says blah, 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 and clearly it was the right thing to share what they were up to. And then he unveils, the wolf pie that he made. That was a bit of a heart melting moment. I really enjoyed that.
And love Arya's second kill. Am I got that right?
Yes. Well, yes. Since she's been on the road.
Since she's been rolling with Nick Nolte, the Hound. Yeah.
And then the only other thing left is at the wall. You continue to watch the intrigue.
Yeah.
The increasingly agonizing restrictions placed on
Although
the one guy who actually cares about, something besides propriety.
I felt like it was bordering on the edge of unbelievable, and then which is a weird thing to say in something like Game of Thrones, right? But like I started to feel like really like would he have really dismissed John quite so clumsily?
Well, I thought they did a good job of showing early on that he was irrationally predisposed to focus on power and say screw you to John. And in that regard, I believed it. I hated it, but I believed it.
And that didn't feel contrary to the books or contrary to the universe to me necessarily. But I do feel like with Danny and with John, I'm ready for that next cylinder to click, and it looks like we're going to get at least more of that on the wall. And it would not shock me if next week's episode focuses very, very heavily on the wall like and King's Landing.
Yeah, it does feel like you're feeling the tensioning on the tumblers, and it feels like those two are getting tighter and tighter. It does feel like the John story arc is about to snap a lot faster than the Danny one will. Yeah,
for sure, because the wildlings are in the preview for next week. So we're going to get some. I don't know if we'll actually get them at the wall yet, but we're going to get something moving closer.
No, but we are going to get. I mean, they intentionally sort of set up by having.
Can I ask you guys something on the HBO? We're watching HBO Go, and they don't do previously ons for that. Do they do that on HBO? Is that institutionally okay? So they do it live, but they don't do it.
No, but they do have them on HBO Go on the menu, at least on the Apple TV thing. It's like right below. You have the previously on.
You have to opt in order to watch those. Okay.
What?
You have to opt in order to watch those. Whereas, which we would never do. Okay.
I would like to watch what happened previously, or I would like to.
Well, maybe I'll make the effort to do that, because that kind of thing, on the one hand, you get a vague Spidey sense spoiler about what's to come based on what they're emphasizing.
Oh, that guy hasn't shown up in 6 episodes. I wonder why they're reminding me.
Exactly, right?
By the way, chat room is casting the buddy cop movie to hilarious effect. Jesse Ventura as the Hound, Janet Reno as the Hound,
Hulk Hogan as Robert Baratheon,
Gary Busey as the Hound.
Speaking of which,
brother,
there's a great BuzzFeed video that is about all the actors of Game of Thrones and the roles they had before then, and some of them are super surprising, some of them are less so. I remember the one that stuck with me, even though I mixed it up later on, was that Grand Meister Pycelle is the Imperial officer who reports to Vader in Empire Strikes Back when they're coming in on Hoth. He's the one who comes in as he's got naked head on there.
Also, Donovan from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Oh my God,
American
you're right.
Nazi sympathizer.
Holy cow, you just blew my mind.
Dude.
And what was the role that Tywin Lannister had in Ollie G in the House?
Oh, he's the villain. He's the villain. Charles Dance is the villain in Ollie G in the House, and the movie, spoiler alert, but it is spoiler in time. He ends up dancing in ladies' clothing, and it's if you enjoy Tywin Lannister, then you can go and just look up Charles Dance, Ollie G in the House.
That's amazing.
All right, you guys, let's move on to Godzilla.
Yeah.
And I will just lay the groundwork by saying we were going to go see it on Sunday, and then after my friend Roger's opinion, which he said first half of the movie he was intrigued, but the second half didn't pay off, so he was really disappointed. Eileen decided that we should get tacos instead, so we didn't see it.
All right, first of all, let me tell the personal intrigue that happened going into this. I decided I was going to try to go see this with my brother. Part of the deal would be I'd take, my oldest away from the house to get her out of Bonnie's hair because we were out at our friend's 50th birthday party until 4 a.m. And I said, hey, Penny, you want to go see Godzilla? She's like, sure, whatever. And then after I bought the tickets, before I went to pick her up, Penny calls back and says, Dad, I just watched the trailer for Godzilla. I can't. It's too scary. And meanwhile, my 6-year-old Josie was like, I'll go see it. And so I go and I look, and it's PG-13. I'm like, all right, a lot of people are going to die. Is that cool? She's like, yeah, it's fine. It's
and like, what I feel, because you were telling me the story, and it's like, I feel like there needs to be some representation of how adorable Josie is. That like you, because you are like, you were just giving this very calm, cool, collected, but Josie is like, if you were to write central cast adorable 6-year-old,
it would be a 6-year-old Veronica Belmont is what you would picture, complete with the blonde and with bangs.
Yes.
That's Josie, right?
Exactly, but she has the very adorable little girl, like, yo, go see it. Like, she has like that kind of voice. Like it's an amazing picture. If you've ever...
She's like, I don't know. I think it looks cool. Like she's defensive and weird that she thinks it's a good idea.
Nonchalant Josie is
and so I don't know what there's going to be in there. I don't know if the PG-13 is for cursing or nudity. I suspect it's for violence. And so I'm like, okay, well, you don't do well when it gets loud. What do you say we bring some headphones? And she's like, well, I got these earmuffs here. I'll put these on and I'll just do this. She goes and man, she loved it, and she was very genuinely scared, usually not by the monsters, but by the natural disaster parts, because, spoiler alert, there's a lot of people who die in recreations of horrific crap that none of us really wish we'd ever seen. Like, if you've seen any of the Japanese tsunami footage, you get to see a recreation of that. If you watch September 11th happen, you get to see some buildings go crumbling down. If you've seen buildings or airplanes blow up, you get to watch a lot of that. That was the stuff she had a problem with. But I will say this, Godzilla's pro wrestling finishing move, number one, was great. Universally, it was one of the best. I wish you could have seen it. I'm going to describe it for the folks at home. I'm going to try to recreate it for the video watchers. Her eyes got big as saucers. Her mouth just stretched in a grimace of amazement, and she did a deadpan slow turn to me going... like just a full on, like I want comically wanting to show off how amazed she was by it. So she liked it a lot. Me personally, I think that they did everything right. I think they did a good job of justifying a lot of very silly things. I think at the end of the day, though, I still spent half the movie bored and the other half of the movie shouting, "Bring back Bryan Cranston! Boo, Ken Watanabe! You can only stand there looking amazed for so long."
Man, he does stand around looking amazed a lot, though, right? Like,
right?
that dude does good amazed. Like, you're looking at that guy just be amazed for like about 45 minutes. And like, I didn't ever really feel like it got old, but like, there's certainly a time where like, man, he really only has one switch in this movie. And that is like, actually, no, psych. He's got two switches. He's got,
yeah.
And then he's got, we literally just had to hire somebody of Asian descent to say Godzilla.
Godzilla,
like,
yeah.
It's like, we couldn't just have white people say Godzilla all movie. At some point, someone's got to go, Godzilla. Here's my thought. It is a film that it's odd to say that I think punches above its weight. Because it's a blockbuster, and we very rarely think of blockbusters kind of overachieving. I think that the monster movie and Godzilla films in general are very restrictive. It's very hard, it's very easy storytelling wise to kind of find the wrong morals or find annoying or story wise unsatisfying morals, like they did in the 1998 one, where it's just a straight morality tale of like, we dump things in the ocean and now our sins are revisited upon us. This is not that story. I was very, very happy as it unfolded. I think there are two monsters in the film, Godzilla, obviously, and Bryan Cranston through the first hour, who without him, like, and this is chewing the scenery, Bryan Cranston. There is no subtlety to the Bryan Cranston performance. But if not for him, I feel like it would have read very Lifetime movie. There's not a tremendous amount of acting heft to it. It is a film that is kind of defined by its beats. But that being said, leaving the film, the first thing that kind of kept popping into my mind was the Spielbergian elements of the movie and how they are able to continue to keep you invested. Why have a random exposition scene when you can have an exposition scene with a dog or a kid? Why have a random somebody just drop a flashlight when you can also have that be the big reveal of something behind them? Why just train your camera on Godzilla fighting the Mothra or whatever versions of the creatures that they're doing when you can always, and this is really where kind of his experience with monsters is really shown, you can kind of always have it be until the last really 15 minutes do you just get big sustained Godzilla fighting people. Everything is usually through these kind of peripherals, or you kind of see a little bit, or you're always getting about 5 seconds. But to me, it was a film with heart. And I'm curious to know your opinion on this, Brian. This is a movie that destroys San Francisco. Last summer, Star Trek Into Darkness destroyed San Francisco. Man of Steel destroyed Metropolis. I felt cold and dirty after those two films last year. And this film, I did not feel like it was that society and all the life that was lost was a prop, but it was rather just collateral damage and necessary sacrifice to stop a much larger, more terrible fate.
There were two moments that stuck out to me as I noticed that as we went through it. One was in the first third of the movie where you have this quarantine zone that they sneak into in order to go find a thing. There was these great, abandoned post-apocalyptical cityscapes all around that made great window dressing. But I remember thinking, oh my God, this is brilliant. This is where they're going to fight, and it won't matter that they're knocking over buildings because we all know they're pretty much empty. And then they didn't use that at all. Instead, They just killed a bunch of people. And then likewise, jumping forward, there was like one too many scenes, and it was difficult because I was watching it with my 6-year-old. I was like, all right, come on. Do you have to keep reminding? What's with all these shots of people screaming and running away from the giant monster? Do you need to remind my 6-year-old that people are dying? And then I reminded myself that, of course, Godzilla was defined.
Brought a 6-year-old to Godzilla.
Yeah, of course, I was, and in my defense, I was 6 when I watched Godzilla, right? But that is what defined that show: is the monster comes and people scream and run away. But it was like, I don't know. I don't think I would have been so focused on the human element if they didn't keep going out of their way to make sure random characters showed up for nonsensical reasons just in time to stand helplessly at the next disaster set piece. It was, I don't normally notice those things, but it weighed very heavy on this, and it seemed more obvious than usual.
I don't disagree that it's very heavy-handed in that, and they kind of go out of their way to put these characters where it's like, in the first 5 minutes, like, listen, like, I do 5 things. I love boats. I disarm bombs. Like, I
love my
like
dad.
Riding trams to the airport
and my wife.
Like, and that's the only thing you need to know about me. And then it's like, I wonder what's gonna happen over the next 5 set pieces. It was a movie that, but at the end of the day, and I totally hear that criticism, I was not bothered by it because in the moments, the set pieces were built well. There was always, just in terms of like, okay, well, there's 2 on the top of the bridge and 2 on the bottom of the bridge. And now we can see kind of how that unfolds, that visually there is kind of a poetry to it. It never, the craftsmanship of the action beats, to me, excused some of the sins of why do we have to put these same 4 people.
And I will totally
things.
back your play on that. The set pieces and the action sets, and even the getting ready for the action sets were extraordinary. There are, I like the movie a lot better now that I'm not experiencing it. When I access it as a file of set pieces I've seen, almost all of them, I'm like, man, that was a good set piece. That was a great moment. That's good. All of them check pluses, A pluses. But I will say again, like at the moment, it was brief moments of board, and like, oh, well, that's good. For example, I really dug when they do the is it called a halo drop, where you drop the high altitude, low, whatever. Like that was amazing, and I loved the fact that they actually used the 2001 Haunting Overture music as the lead-in for it. They used it in the trailers, and I figured it was just like, they're borrowing, our feelings for this other show to hype the trailer. But they used it in the movie, and that moment they jump up, I actually got a little vertigo lurch in the stomach, and the whole way down it was haunting, and it's like, I get goosebumps thinking about it. And I guess that's makes it it's almost like the uncanny valley, where it did so much right that I noticed in stark relief the things that I really disliked about it. And I do believe certainly wasting Bryan Cranston. You had Bryan Cranston, who legitimately proved himself a genius, and the sum total of his genius was for Ken Watanabe to go like, oh, I guess that guy did kind of almost figure out what we're up to. But now he's dead. So anyway, like it amounted to nothing, I mean,
that might have. I mean, who knows exactly why they had to make that decision, whether or not it was like, well, we only have 5 days of Bryan Cranston, so like it's either this or we don't have, or we have even less of it. I mean, I think he was necessary for the first part of the film. Would I have liked to have seen his character come back? And was I kind of like, I was kind of holding my guard up for him to come back the entire movie, because we have this shadowy transnational semi-private corporation that is kind of weaved throughout this narrative, and I was kind of hoping that they were cloak and dagger enough to be like, yeah, no, we faked his death so nobody can understand that he is really the person that knows some stuff, and then he shows up at the end. I hear everything that you're saying, and there's not a whole lot that I can disagree with. But at the end of the day, I was really delighted by the movie, and I was surprised I was delighted by the movie, because I really had fairly little investment in our main character. Not to mention that the film in general sort of has a protagonist problem.
Yeah, you're damn right about that. I definitely
we really don't know exactly who the protagonist is. You kind of think it's Bryan Cranston, and then you kind of think that it's the son. You kind of think it's Ken Watanabe, and then Ken Watanabe just kind of disappears.
There is exactly what Roger Chang was upset about when he told me about the movie. He's like, I was really invested in Bryan Cranston as the protagonist and his story, and thought this was going to be really interesting, and then it ends up having no bearing on the end, and it just turns into an action movie.
Yeah. Well, and your answer, of course, is they made sure the protagonist had his name in the freaking title. It's Godzilla, who, of course, only shows up and struts his stuff for a maximum of 12 minutes of screen time. But what a 12 minutes it was!
No, it's great. And here's the thing, Tom. I would really disagree with Roger, because I think that element, the movie, if the movie succeeds on any level, it's because it's a survival film, and it sets fairly clear, very early on stakes of the characters that we do eventually wind up following and understanding what they want. And they are very, very simple stakes. Bryan Cranston is by far the best actor among everybody else in the cast. And he does, again, because he is a short-lived character, he chews every scene and is screaming and crying in every scene, and is great because he is great at doing that. But I think by taking him away early, to me, it helped reinforce, hey, listen, I'm pretty sure I know who's not going to die, but at the same time, there was an unsettling element of like, well, how does this movie survive as well as all these characters?
That's a good point. Like, once Bryan Cranston dies, I looked at the landscape and I'm like, is there a single character that I'll care more about than the one who just died? And the answer was no, including Godzilla. And at that point, there was kind of no coming back, like once you lost, to me, far and away the most sympathetic character, the one I got and wanted to own a piece of his misery and a piece of his passion and quest, and that's gone. I'm like, all right, whatever. You got the pouty kid, you got his loving wife, or who cares? Whatever.
Well, but listen, and I agree with you, and yet I enjoyed the movie, which is, I think, kind of why it is so well put together. My final thought on this is I think that it's who is it? Gareth Edwards?
I don't care.
Who
How about
directed
that?
this?
Yes. Monsters guy. That's
Yes.
his legal name.
I think his next movie will be his best movie.
I agree.
This is my prediction. He
very-
has proven himself to be an exceptional directorial talent. He has shown himself to make whatever his budget is look more than what his budget is. And I think in his next movie, and whether or not it's Godzilla 2 or something else, he will have the acting heft behind the movie that I think
that's actually a really good point,
film.
Justin, because it's one thing you can have a breakout hit. Who's the guy that did Donnie Darko and then finally got a big budget feature? And
Richard Kelly.
Did Southland Tales, which is a massive disaster. It is very difficult to make that indie to mainstream leap. And for all our little quibbles, I think we can all agree this is certainly one of the top 5 films of the entire summer. Yes.
In terms of
just quality, your own vote for what you like the best.
I mean, yeah, it's up there for me now. I mean, I'd probably put Captain America ahead of it, but
can we talk real quick before we wrap up? One of the things we talked about during the Weird Things podcast is we compared it to other monster movies, and I placed it. I liked the movie. I didn't love it. I would say that I liked Peter Jackson's King Kong more than this one because it had a character that I understood more, and it had more development and a more fascinating world that I didn't mind spending so much time in. But would you? It sounded like you would disagree with that. You like this more than King Kong?
Yes, no, very much so. It's not that I will defend the second hour of King Kong to the death. It is a suffocatingly amazing, quite possibly Peter Jackson at his best, in my opinion. I love the Skull Island stuff. And I think that there are elements more of the third hour than the first hour, but that to me was a film that was suffocated by its own overindulgence and is very hard for me to totally wrap my arms around. Godzilla, I was constantly looking for a reason to be like, this guy is dead now. Why do I care? This main actor is really not great. Okay, it's just going to be a bunch of monsters fighting. And yet I was consistently enthralled with it. I found it to be a far more tight film. And for that, I will always thank it.
That's so funny because, literally, my only complaint was I remember extended periods. I'd say that the Godzilla could have had 20 to 30 minutes of cuts and been a better movie. I just spent so much time just waiting, but to each his own.
I mean, I'll tell you what, though, but if we're gonna, the weight that you could cut out of King Kong is far, far greater. And I mean, just in terms of runtime, I mean, it's like true. An hour and 15 minutes longer than the other one.
That's true. But as a percentage, those cuts would take up less percentage.
I don't know.
Cuts.
I would cut 30% of it. I would cut the entire, they would get on the boat and then it would go 3 days later. And then they would be on Skull Island.
Sure. All right, let me check back in with Tom on his quest to finish The Shield. Tell us which episode you got up to and what did you think?
Episode 12, 2 Days of Blood, the penultimate episode of The Shield, where Gilroy tries to get Vic Mackey to cover up a hit and run.
Oh, yes.
And as Mackey tries to cover it up, starts to find out more is being hitted by Gilroy than he appreciated. This after Gilroy told Mackey, I can't back you up anymore. So there's definitely some table setting going on there where Mackey realizes that Gilroy not only has been a shit to him, but also is into some deeper stuff than even Mackey is comfortable with. There's also the riots over the killings, and we start to see a good old-fashioned Los Angeles riot in the making. And then there's the slightly disturbing comic relief of cockfighting, where they're trying to follow the trail of a gun runner. And there's the weird, I can't remember the name of the guy now that's Mackey's teammate.
Which one, Shane or
is it Shane? Yeah,
Shane Vendrell,
who does the cockfighting and gets all soft about the roosters and.
I don't remember which character it was, but if it's the guy from Justified, it's Shane Vendrell.
Yeah, I think it's Vendrell. Okay. Anyway, There's that.
Do
that
you know
whole
what I liked
situation.
about the Gilroy stuff? And I believe in the second or third season, there's another character that's similar to Gilroy in that you see the bleak, soft, weak future that awaits Vic Mackey if he keeps on his current path. You got these people who are like, hey, man, I used to do the game like you, and now you're in charge, and, well, some stuff's catching up with me. Can you help me out? And he's cleaning up the old man's mess. I enjoyed that as a theme, and a minor spoiler, you'll get to see more of that kind of stuff later on.
I was kind of half expecting in this episode to see Mackey turn on Gilroy, because Gilroy had basically said, I'm abandoning you, then came and asked for his help with something that turned out to be a deeper pot than Mackey expected. And I was waiting for him to just turn Gilroy into Acevedo, but it didn't happen.
Yeah. Who knows what the future holds, Tom?
Well, what the future holds is the season finale of season 1, which I'll watch this week.
Are you still enjoying it?
Yeah.
Your interest meter is still running strong?
Yeah, my interest meter is above 50% for
Good.
sure.
Right on, man.
Can I go on one real quick rant just to wrap everything up?
Yeah.
Godzilla is 5 billion times the movie the Pacific Rim is, and people are we're getting into an argument in the chat room. Pacific Rim is a disaster of a boring bomb of a movie. I hated Pacific Rim, and I love what's his face, the
Guillermo del Toro.
I felt like it was overcomplicated, overstuffed. I cared not a lick about either the characters. Although I will say that I feel like Charlie Hunnam, the main actor in the lead in Pacific Rim, and the guy who's the lead in Godzilla have about the same acting talent, and yet Godzilla was able to make me at least care, not scream in anger every time that he opened his mouth on screen like Pacific Rim did.
Did you find yourself inadvertently barking laughter at that final scene as Godzilla's walking off, and you see the jumbotron say with the chyron that says,
"Oh my God, no!" A little. By the way, spoiler alert on its spoiler time. The headline writer for the television station, which is omnipresent throughout the movie, decides as like. By the way, a nuclear bomb has just been exploded on the coast of America.
hundreds of thousands dead. It's like
thousands are dead. People
worst.
can't find each other. Godzilla then rises up and starts making his way out to sea. And the headline writer for the television news station decides to get real gully and write "King of the Monsters, comma, Savior of our city?
Question mark.
Which I can only imagine that being the Bill O'Reilly talking point
Yes.
that night on Fox News. Well, you know, he is the king of the monsters, but yet is he the savior of our city? We now go to E.B. Lewis.
Dennis Miller with commentary.
Listen here, babe. I just kind of think Godzilla is savior of what? I mean, come on.
Man.
So anyway.
Dude, I'm sorry. That was a longer spoiler in time than we usually do. I apologize, Tom. We sort of squeezed you out with our Godzilla.
Yeah, no
talk.
worries. That was
talked too
interesting to
much.
listen to.
Right on, man. Well, so I guess, is there anything to wrap up? That's everything.
That's it. It's spoiler. You've been spoiled, folks. Go put yourself in the fridge before you spoil even more.
You're too spoiler. Go ahead. In fact, jerky yourself. Get jerkied. It's not too late.
Jesus. It's the internet, Brian.
Salt, pork, sunlights.
Bye, everybody.